Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Board Masters. Now, I understand if you saw my weekly preview that you will be expecting my playthrough of Quacks of Quedlinberg with Stace today, but unfortunately we had technical issues on the weekend where the top-down camera for some reason recorded it perfectly for 3 seconds and then zoomed back in so that you couldn't see anything that was going on in the cauldrons, which defeated the whole point of the video. So we're going to endeavour to film it again this weekend and put it up next week. But I thought I'd take the opportunity to talk about Monster Hunter World, given that, as you can see, it's going to finish in just a handful of hours. And the reason why I want to talk about this when I don't often talk about Kickstarter campaigns, except for like my backlog videos, is that this campaign has been fascinating, really. I mean, it's one that from the get-go, when they announced this back in January, it looked great, was really exciting. If you've seen my Kickstarter backlog videos, you know that I've already backed Primal, and I'm super excited for that. I think it looks stunning. And this is very similar. I mean, the minis in this are absolutely gorgeous. And, you know, a lot of people I respect, Alex at Board Game Co, Jesse at Quackalate, definitely saying this is a very fun game, so it had me very, very interested. A couple of things I will stress is that I'm not coming into this as a fan of the IP at all. It's not one that I've ever played, to be honest. Generally, or historically, the Monster Hunter games have come out on the sort of handheld consoles that I haven't had, and although Monster Hunter World is a bit more mainstream for the consoles, it's just one that I've never got round to because I've always had an even greater video game backlog than the board game one that I've built up over the past 12 months. And, I mean, I will also stress that regardless of my feelings on this, with over 3 million pledged and over 19,000 backers, this campaign has been very, very successful. But yeah, it's undeniable that this campaign has also brought with it an awful lot of heat, an awful lot of criticism. And I'm going to go into why. Now, obviously, this campaign, when they announced it back in January, they did announce pretty much everything up front. I mean, look at that mini. These dragons do look absolutely stunning. And it's going to upset me a lot that I'm missing out on this. But yeah, going back to when they announced it, they basically put everything up front and said, this is the game, it's basically finished, there's not going to be any stretch goals. So this is what we're offering. And for me, you know, that was fine. I've got no problem with no stretch goals, and honesty up front I'm happy with. And, you know, they went back on that because a lot of people pointed out that they had 12 hunters in the original All-In, where the game has 14, and just before the campaign went live, they were able to amend that and change that so that now all 14 hunters are in the All-In pledge, so they are able to pivot and change and add things in if they want. But then they went to these daily unlocks to sort of appease people for the stretch goals, and I think it's fair to say that they are underwhelming at best. I mean, when you look at what Primal added throughout the campaign, the number of monsters and expansions and things was huge. And yet, with this one, I mean, this guy is the only new monster throughout the entirety of the campaign, despite the fact they've raised over £3 million. And he was basically leaked before the start of the campaign anyway, so he wasn't a surprise to a lot of people. Other than that, they've added some cards so that you can have alternate behaviours for 2 of the monsters. They are not at this moment allowing people to purchase additional minis for those monsters. So, you know, you have to use the same mini for 2 different monsters, basically, because in the games they look completely different. They're completely different colour styles, and you know, for people that want to paint their minis, they're now going to have to choose, like the Rathalos, I believe it's between red and blue, so they will be facing off against the Azura Rathalos, but they will have the other Rathalos mini because they weren't allowed to buy a second one. which seems like an absolutely bizarre decision to disadvantage your backers in that way. Or if you're going to go with an alternate monster build, provide a mini. I mean, these are stunning, and people just want more of it. And whilst they did give us minis in the daily unlocks, they were minis that, let's be fair, not many. Some people are very happy with them. This is my opinion, and this is my opinion from what I've gleaned from the comments and from the Facebook group. And so it's not an exhaustive feeling. Obviously, a lot of people are very happy with this. But I think for most people in this hobby, obviously a lot of people as well who are attracted to this campaign are attracted purely because of the IP. And, my daily unlocks don't seem to want to unlock, or don't want to show, or either that or they're so embarrassed by them they've hidden them. Right, let's go to the updates. So basically what they've added in for the most part is alternate sculpts for the hunters, which I guess kind of makes sense in a way for some people. I mean, they brought out these ones, so 4 exclusive starting armor miniatures. So the theory being that they start in the very basic armor, the leather armor that you start in the game, and then when you craft some armor, you can personalize your journey and upgrade your mini to the armored mini. Which, sounds great in theory, but they only then gave these starting armor minis for 4 of the 14 hunters, and only in the pledge that comes with the other additional packs of hunters, as opposed to the pledge that only includes the Ancient Forest hunters that these are based on. And this is already coming off the back of the fact that the 4 Ancient Forest hunters were given 1 additional sculpt each, so 4 additional sculpts for the Ancient Forest hunters, and then they doubled down on that and gave us 4 more sculpts for the Ancient Forest hunters, while the other 10 hunters got no extra sculpts. And it's just the most illogical thing I could ever think of. Either, if you want to do starting armor, by all means, but do it for all 14 hunters, and then you're sort of giving this impression that you can personalize your journey and upgrade your mini depending on the armor you've crafted, but then you've only got 2 minis you can choose from in the Ancient Forest Hunters collection anyway, so you're not covering the majority of the armor types that you'll be crafting anyway. So you're not personalizing the journey, you're just signifying that you've crafted some armor, which again is a weird halfway house of, let's give the impression of you can personalize your journey and this is all about what you're doing, but the reality is that it's got nothing to do with what you're doing beyond the fact that you've just crafted some armor, so now you can swap a mini over. It's not a mini that relates to how your character is now, because the odds are the armor is completely different. So it's created sort of a weird expectation of trying to sell personalized progression that isn't there. And yeah, it's just such a bizarre approach that 4 of the hunters have 12 sculpts in total, and then the other 10 hunters only have 10, even though they're exclusive to the higher pledges, which presumably you would want to make the higher pledges more attractive to people to upgrade to, rather than give them alternate sculpts of... I just don't understand it. And please comment down below if you can see the logic in it. I know people have argued that, well, it will gauge the popularity of the alternate sculpts so that maybe they can provide other alternate sculpts for the Wild Spire Wastes and the Hunter's Arsenal. But it just fundamentally doesn't work on a very, very basic level, because they're not getting any information on how popular these alts are because they've bundled them in with existing pledges, and people have either accepted it or taken them because they want the rest of the game and they just happen to be in it. It doesn't give any information on how popular these alternate sculpts are. And again, look, one daily unlock was 4 sculpts, other daily unlocks were 2 sculpts, or the first 200s were only 1 sculpt per day. So it really does fly in the face of traditional Kickstarter campaigns where the more successful a project is, the more value you're giving back. Whereas this one, they obviously stressed in advance that that's not what they were going to do. But they actually added stuff that made this campaign look less valuable. Because me, for one, £210 for the initial pledge, it was expensive compared to what I'd got with Primal, and because I want the monsters were my focus. Let's see if I can find the all-in. And there are a lot less monsters in this than there is in Primal, for example. So you get these giant £211. So it was pricey, but it wasn't too bad. It wasn't something that I was unhappy with. I probably would have gone all in if the campaign had finished the way it started. And it's such a strange psychology, sort of mental gymnastics that it's gone through over the course of this campaign. That the more they've added stuff through the daily unlocks, the less I've wanted the game, because now I feel like in my £211, a certain proportion of that has gone to make 8 alternate sculpts that I have no need for, have no want of, and I basically would just be throwing a portion of that money down the drain because Steamforge wanted to force in and crowbar in alt sculpts that hardly anyone was asking for, apart from maybe some fans who didn't like the armour choices on some minis. But even then, they weren't consulted on what armour choice they would want on them. And it's the first time I've ever seen a campaign run like this. And I admit, I haven't been in the community for long. I've seen some toxic campaigns like Dead Reckoning I've talked about in the past, where people were very, very unhappy with the daily unlocks in that campaign, where they were... one daily unlock would be an expansion pack, and then the next daily unlock would be, oh, here's a new gameplay video, which was ridiculous and just set a level of expectation for the community that they were always going to disappoint. And it's almost... But in fairness to Dead Reckoning, they listened to their backers who wanted just a all gameplay pledge, and they brought it back in at the end, and the end of the campaign was a lot more positive and was really successful. And Steamforge games are more than capable of that. They did that 6 months ago with Bardsung. They had a game that I think there was some negativity. It didn't appeal to me at all at the start until I think it was an interview with Alex at Board Game Co, where they really were able to get the point across of how the narrative structure of the game and things that really won me over. And, you know, the last week or two of that campaign when I was part of it were great fun. The updates were fun to read. The community was really positive. They were throwing so much into it. Whereas this one, it very much feels, and, you know, I don't want to sound unfair, but it very much feels like Steamforge Games know that this game and this campaign is going to be hugely successful no matter what they do. Despite themselves, really. They can just sit back, put their feet up, and Monster Hunter fans will flock to this and pledge millions of pounds to it, as they already have. And, you know, I put a little survey up in the official Monster Hunter group, board game group on Facebook last night, just asking just a basic question of, if you're backing the game at core or above, would you still be backing this game with this amount of content for this price if it wasn't branded Monster Hunter? And over 90% of them said no, they wouldn't. They would have no interest in this game if it wasn't just for the branding. And I think that does go some way to explain, well, the success of the campaign, because it's Monster Hunter fans who will pay a premium to get Monster Hunter stuff. And, the value isn't really an issue. It's a secondary concern. And then, I've lost my train of thought now. But it's just a peculiar thing that Steamforged Games know. It's almost like they've decided, in order to make extra monsters or anything that would appease the people who are unhappy with the value proposition, that would create more work and more expense than they're willing to go through to attract a relatively or comparatively small number of extra pledges. I mean, they already have 19,000 backers. I think Bloodborne and Dark Souls did 25 and 30 comparatively, and did around £4 to £5 million. So from those numbers, you can see that it's undeniable that this campaign has, whilst being extremely successful, has definitely underperformed. And whether this is Capcom being difficult and not allowing any changes on behalf of Steamforged, or whether it is just Steamforged not being willing to listen to the community, because the comment section is a very strange place on here, because there are lots of representatives of Steamforged who are very, very quick to respond to so many comments, as long as they have nothing to do with people talking about the value. I mean, anyone that's at, well, you can see there's pledges cancelling there, but the sheer number of people that, I mean, if you spend an hour in the comment section, you will get infuriated of the amount of people saying, if I pledge $1, can I get access to the PM, and will it be the same price? Because it's every 2 or 3 comments. And Steamforged are very, 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 very quick to answer each and every one of those queries. Oh, there we go. Question: when the pledge manager comes through, could I upgrade from an entry to an all-in? So just the sheer volume of these comments, I think, does reinforce the fact that this Kickstarter is targeted at people who don't use Kickstarter, who don't understand Kickstarter campaigns, who don't read the FAQ, who don't read the existing comments. Now there you go. So someone praising it, and fair play to them. If they enjoy the game, that's the main thing. I hope they love it. But Steamforged are very, very quick to respond to anything like that. And rule clarifications, they're straight in on that, which is great. They've got to provide their help and guidance, and I'm delighted they're doing that. But there's such a difference between their engagement to people who are, and it's not about being positive and negative, because people have voiced their criticisms in a very constructive, positive manner, and they just haven't been engaged with. Whereas the people who just want to ask a question are engaged with immediately, and it's almost like Steamforged are sat there going, la 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 la, don't want to know, just back the game or don't. And yeah, I am quite sad that I won't be, because it's one I've been excited for 4 months, and through this campaign they've driven me away from it. And it doesn't matter, a great scheme of things. You can see how successful they've been. They've got the money in their back pocket. Why should they care whether I cancelled or not? And they probably shouldn't. But it's just disappointing that an IP and a game that looks so good has, in my opinion, whilst being very successful, has underperformed drastically, because I would bet the number of backers would be up similar to Dark Souls by the same company if they had run the campaign in a more traditional manner, or even if they just said, this is the all-in, here's the campaign, back it or don't, had no additions, I would bet everything that they would have earned more money if they just had a 10-day pre-order system saying this is what you get. Even though they stressed the daily unlocks would be cosmetic, and then they weren't, because there was the Kickstarter enemy, there was the 2 packs of cards for the alternate monsters behaviour. So even their behaviour throughout the campaign in terms of the whether the unlocks were gameplay or cosmetic has been incredibly inconsistent, and it's been a fascinating watch. It's been really, really interesting. I've talked myself in and out of this game so many times. Those first few days where people were moaning about stretch goals, I was right in Steamforge's corner in the group, arguing, look, it doesn't matter. They've offered you this, you either choose to accept it or not, and that's it, you go. If you don't, they've said they're not going to do stretch goals, they're entitled to make a profit on the game. They don't have to give back all the profit they make. But when they started then padding out pledges with plastic alternate miniatures that not only offer no gameplay, because I can live with the ultra cute pig Poogie update that they gave yesterday, even though he does nothing gameplay wise other than giving him a little tap, pat the Poogie as part of your downtime activities. I mean, that was a daily unlock. I mean, he's adorable. I'd love to have that little mini. Even if he just sits on the table, and if you choose to pat the Boogie, you just give him a little tap on the head. That's literally all it contributes to the game. I can live with that. But don't give me minis that literally have no value whatsoever because they're just going to be sat in the box. I don't need 3 minis for 4 hunters. Well, 3 minis each for 4 hunters, while the other 10 only have 1. It's a huge inconsistency throughout the whole game. One person is going to get a starting armor hunter, while the other 2 people playing have to start with an armored hunter because they weren't provided with a starting armor mini, and it's just bizarre. I don't understand it. Yeah, it is what it is, and I really, really hope that everyone who does back this does love the game, because it does look fun, just unfortunately overpriced. And part of me thinks I will go for Teostra here and I'll just buy him as the Kickstarter exclusive dragon in the PM. So I might keep my pound just so I can buy him, and then look to get the rest of it when it inevitably comes to retail, because it will come to retail. It'll come to retail, and it will almost certainly be cheaper if you look at Steamforge Games' record, especially by the time you take off the postage, which looks like it's going to be roughly 10% on top of the all-in. It's a big chunk. And yeah, so that's where I'm at, basically. And again, sorry that it's just sort of a rambling series of thoughts, but I wanted to wait until that last update was out to see what they would do today in terms of, would they just carry on the way they were and go with the predictable stuff, or would they have had some internal discussions and say, look, there are a lot of people who are there wanting to give us their money if we just give them a reason to. Let's give them that reason, and maybe they would have come out with an extra monster or something like that, which would have been all I needed, to be honest. Just something to tip the scales to make it look like a decent value again. But unfortunately, for me, that isn't what they've done. And so I will leave the video there, I think. Let me know down below if you've backed it and why. Are you a fan of the IP? Have you backed it despite not being a fan of the IP because you think it does offer good enough value? I mean, every time I look at these minis, it makes me sad because I want them. And I'll just have to be sensible, which is very unlike me, and wait to retail. And that's where I stand on Monster Hunter World. So thank you for watching. Look after yourself, stay safe, and have a good one. Bye-bye now.